Okay, maybe we should start more or less on time. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this first event organized by the Society of Spanish Researchers in Denmark. Many people actually ask me, oh, but that's only for Spanish. No. I would really like to point out that this is open to the whole scientific community and completely international, even though you may hear some Spanish around, but just you know, like an instinct. So the talk today is about biosustainability, a concept that you may not have heard before. And for that we have some nice speakers, apart from me. Okay. I'm not that nice. But we have Søren Molin. Thank you very much for taking part in this first event, but we're also very proud of that. He's actually a scientific director at the Untitled Foundation Center for Biosustainability. He later introduced what we are doing in our center and what is the mission of our center and so forth. And Patri, one of my best colleagues at the CFE, that he will be talking about abroad. So the first thing that you may wonder is who we are, because we just recently constituted on October last year officially. So even though we've been carrying out some activities in a smaller scale, we now became an official association, and we are also supported by the Spanish embassy to some extent. And basically we have some goals. Mainly help Spanish researchers to establish here in Denmark, thereby network that other researchers may have, and some advice. And we're also building a welcome package that will aggregate all the useful advices that you can receive. Also try to promote as much as we can the collaborations between Denmark and Spain. Basically trying to put in contact researchers, either Spanish or Danish or international researchers in Danish institutions and Spanish institutions. What we are doing today, it's also another of the goals of the association, which is scientific dissemination. So we want to let the public know what we are doing and what is important for the society, so we can receive more support at institutional levels. And finally, we'll try to facilitate mobility between researchers in both countries. So those are the most important goals we have, but we have more goals, and we are like gradually working on that. And then finally, I would like to mention our twin associations, because we are one out of other associations abroad of Spanish researchers. Some of them are actually big and very influent, like in the US or in the UK, but we couldn't be less. So we'll work really hard to be their shadow. So today we are here for an event called Meet the Scientists, inspired also by other associations, similar events in the other associations, which made basically the goal is to bring a specific topic where we kind of have experts working in that field, and then reach the general public and other scientific fields, and let them know what it's about and what's important. So members working on that topic may participate, or other invited guests. So once say that, before going directly to define what is sustainability, biosustainability, I would like to just outline how remarkably world economies have been growing thanks to the oil industry. So basically, since the 30s and even before, we've been producing oil and consuming oil exponentially, and that actually stands for maybe 1/6 of the GDP, the world wealth, thanks to the oil industry. So in this plot, for instance, you can see that how the GDP or the world wealth is reflected as or correlated to the oil production and consumption. And this is only to point out that we depend so much on oil that we should care a little bit about it, because of course the oil reserves are unlimited. But just to illustrate how much we are producing yearly, this is the Eiffel Tower, and so you can see the size of the oil production yearly, and it's a lot. You can put up more than 300 Eiffel Towers together to see how much oil we are producing. So that's a lot. And as I say, that brings some problems because the oil reserves are limited. So there's a theory that brought up Marion King, that we are reaching a point where the production it will be going down, and that is predicted to be within the upcoming years. So after that, the oil production and consumption will have to go down. So since the GDP and the wealth worldwide depends on this, we may get into troubles. Why? Because many of our daily life products derive from oil. So basically, when the oil is processed, you basically heat the oil and then fractionate it in different products. And those are the raw material for building up many of our goods in our daily life, like fuels for trains, for planes, plastics especially, and other chemicals involved, for instance, in flavoring. So many of the things that we are using nowadays, computers and everything, so are made up from oil derivatives. So that's a problem. We have some alternatives, like using plants or crops to try to replace some of these products, like fuels, try to get biofuels from crops and so forth. Since this plant chemistry is like a closed cycle, so a renewable source. So basically you are only using the sun as an input energy, and then you use the plant degrades, or you burn the fuel, and it releases CO2 that is again back to the cycle thanks to the CO2 plant absorption. So it's like a closed cycle, whereas the oil industry products are more persistent in the environment, so we cannot close the cycle for most of them. So here is where we realize that we need a more sustainable alternative. And what sustainability is. Basically, sustainability is a concept that creates and maintains the conditions under which humans and nature, we can exist together, and we can fulfill our social and economic lifestyle, but at the same time trying to keep the environment kind of untouched for our generations and or the future generations. Okay, so that is basically what biosustainability is. And what is biosustainability then? So we introduced the bio in order to say that we are using the natural capabilities of living organisms to do whatever we want. So nature is wise, and we want to take advantage of nature. So learn from nature and try to use these capabilities as wise as we can. So for that, we have different tools, namely scientific biology, for instance. What is scientific biology? So scientific biology is like a group of techniques, tools, by which we basically can extract or isolate DNA, which is like the recipe book for life, for building up a whole organism. And we can then take the pieces we are interested in that encode for a certain function, like to produce a chemical. So we can cut that with what is called molecular scissors. So we have this technology, and then put this piece of DNA into a microbe, for instance, that it grows faster and it's easily to manipulate. So these pieces of DNA, called genes as well, we call them in scientific biology DNA bricks. So it's like a brick. We can put different bricks together to eventually build a pathway, for instance, that can produce a certain chemical. So all these bricks code for a different function. When we put them together in a host, we can obtain or can lead to a chemical that is interesting for us from the industrial point of view. But we also use different tools for biosustainability, like microbiology, because we need to use microbes preferably because they grow very fast and they are very easy to manipulate at industrial scale, like in big tanks. We can culture them in big tanks in fermenters, and then we need to understand how they react to this environment change, because we are taking a microbe that used to be in water or in a plant or in the soil, and we are putting it in a different environment, which is a fermenter, a different temperature. So we feed them with different things. So we need to understand how they react. And finally, we need some biochemistry. So basically, biochemistry tries to approach proteins, which are the small machines that makes all these functions. So we need to understand how they work, and in order to engineer them and improve them to eventually have a perfect turnout for our chemical. So basically, we have already, I just outlined the importance and the dependence that we have on oil and oil industry. We also discuss about sustainability and other resources that we have, and what's biosustainability. And then I just explain some different tools in which our biosustainability is based. So now I would like to give the word to Søren, because he's gonna talk about what initiatives we have here in Denmark to get to that goal, which is biosustainability and a better world. So Søren,
okay,
thank you very much,
Daria and Patricia, for inviting me to this special event. So I'm sure most of you know that Danish biotechnology is really famous. We make beer, and we have done that for quite a while, using yeast as a microbe cell factory that produces beer in large amounts. And some of us think we make good beer. That's debatable, but some of us think we do that. Also, other types of biotechnology is sort of high up in the Danish industrial landscape. One major reason is we don't have any natural resources. I know we have a little bit of oil and natural gas in the North Sea, but actually the Norwegians stole most of it. So they didn't leave much for us. In fact, it's a very interesting story, because the reason that Norway got all the oil in the North Sea seems to be that at the present time, not the present, but at that time, when they were discussing how to divide up the North Sea, Norway, Denmark, and Germany, it turned out that our foreign minister at the time, I won't mention his name, but the most of his reputation was that he was very good at drinking whiskey. And in fact, for the final negotiations, he was totally drunk. And that's what we lost. So since we don't have much oil, we have to do other things, and biotechnology is one that we've been doing for a long time. It was calculated recently by our CEO of the center that probably 60 to 70% of all production in Denmark is based somehow on cell factories. So it's just amazing how much we do here in industrial production based on using live organisms to produce something. So it's not surprising that there is an interest in research, Danish universities, but also in the granting systems, and that's of course important for most of us. So what I want to do is, I want to explain a little bit something which is just one element of biotech research in our country, but it's a big one. And it's actually one of the biggest investments ever done in terms of creating a research grant, if you like. And as you'll see in a minute, we're talking about very, very large numbers of Danish crowns. It's called the Novo Nordisk Foundation Center for Biosustainability. You already heard about biosustainability. So there is now a center, which is a research center. And Novo Nordisk, I think, is a company name, which most of you have heard about. You don't have to be many days in Denmark until you hear about, at least if you are in academia, you hear about Novo Nordisk, our biggest biotech company, and also in many other ways, the most successful biotech company. And in fact, there are two companies, Novo Nordisk and Novozymes. They came out of the same family of industrial activity, and both of them are both successful, rich, and they also attract a lot of people. So when they announce a position, you have, I think, 200 or 500 people applying. So you can feel proud if you actually get a job there. So who are we? So first of all, the center is one of 5 centers totally financed by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. I should add that the Novo Nordisk Foundation owns the companies. So the companies will remain Danish. There is some very special arrangement in this foundation system that we have in Denmark, which makes it possible to keep the threatening multinational companies out and make sure they don't take over the whole business. So there's a very good chance that we can keep Novo Nordisk and Novozymes on Danish hands because of this foundation structure. But that's a technicality. The important thing is that together with 4 other centers, not all the same size, but some of them more or less the same, we were starting in December 2010 by having a check, literally a check, with 700 million Danish crowns handed over from the foundation to the president of DTU, the Technical University of Denmark. And later on, that was expanded to eventually end up being 1 billion and 100 million Danish crowns, which is in the order of 150 million euros. How many pesetas that would be, I cannot even pronounce. So it's a lot of money, and certainly for Danish standards, this is outstanding, a lot of money. So the grant gives us 10 years freedom in the center to work on a program which we have defined ourselves. Of course, the framework was laid down by the foundation. They wanted us to do biosustainability. So the title of the center was given, and a few framework issues were mentioned. But we invented the program, and we are not influenced by the foundation, by what we're doing now. So we can actually do what we want, as long as we produce good science and spend the money. And for the last thing, I'm sure we spend the money. That's the least problem. I think also we do some good science there. So the center was placed at DTU. That was the intention of the foundation, because the other centers are based at Copenhagen University, and they are in the biomedical area. But this was the first center that had a program which is biotechnology. And that was very important. Especially it was important to Novozymes, because Novozymes is the little brother of the Novo Group. The Novo Nordisk company, which is a pharmaceutical company, is much, much larger. And as you probably know, it's the largest producer of insulin in the world, and that's what really brings in the money, I should say. So Novo Nordisk is the big supplier of funds to the foundation. But Novozymes is also very successful, and especially in the recent years, it has come up as a nice little brother and also giving money to the foundation. We are located now in Hørsholm, and this is the whole area here is a science park, and the science park is owned by DTU. So what they do is they have a lot of buildings there, and they rent out the buildings to companies and to others. And it was part of the deal with DTU and the foundation that the foundation money should not be used for bricks. Well, DNA bricks, yes, but not real bricks. So actually, whatever was expensive in terms of housing, DTU had the responsibility to supply that money. So we are staying here for free. DTU gives us the facilities, and that is very important to us because it means that we can use all the money for research. We don't have to think about rent or buying things in terms of buildings and so forth. So at the moment we're sitting in this building, which I love a lot. I don't want to leave it, but eventually we're going to move to this building next year in the summer, and that is located on DTU. They're building it right now. It's increasing every day, and it's actually going to be 5 stories high. The first time in the history of DTU, we will have more than 3 stories on the building. So it's going to be glass and steel, which is also very much different from the DTU boring buildings. Anyway, here we are, and here we will be. So what's the scope? You already heard from Dario what biosustainability is all about. So the CFB, the Center for Biosustainability, is a research center. That's very important. It's not a business, it's not a company. Some people in the center seem to forget that from time to time. But it is a research center. And to be modest, we just want to revolutionize biological routes to chemical production. So the idea is that we want to substitute production of chemicals made by oil products with biological solutions, and therefore intelligent design of cell factories is the important goal for us. And cell factories can be bacteria, and at the moment it's limited mainly to Escherichia coli, which is a normal gut flora organism. The reason why E. coli is interesting in this respect is that it's the most well-studied organism on the globe. So we know more about E. coli than on any other organism in the world. Baker's yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is also well known up here again, but also from other productions. For example, the insulin production by Novo Nordisk is actually made from Baker's yeast. So this is an organism which is manipulable, and you can manipulate it genetically, and you can grow it in large volumes in fermenters, and in fact it also has other processes which makes yeast a very, very interesting production organism. And in the second round of financing, also mammalian cells came into the picture. So these CHO cells are Chinese hamster ovary cells, and they have turned out to be very, very easy. That nothing is easy with mammalian cell cultures, but at least this cell line, is easier than most other cell lines to keep in a kind of production mode. So from these CHO cells, we are interested in making proteins, whereas in terms of E. coli, bacteria, and Baker's yeast, Saccharomyces organisms, microorganisms, we want to make fine chemicals. So there is a difference here which is important. The two biological systems, we want to clone in, as Dario explained before, we want to clone in total pathways to synthesize small molecules. And here, because of the relationship between a Chinese hamster organism and humans, the modification of proteins that take place in CHO cells is very much like modifications that take place in our cells, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to make therapeutic proteins from mammalian cells rather than try to make them from E. coli or yeast. So these 3 organisms form the basis for biosustainable production of important human products. That's the whole idea. So what have we focused on? So we have a mission which is defined as the reason why we are there. Why do we think we can make a difference in this area? And we think we can make a difference between we think we're smarter than most people. I think that's the bottom line of it. But we have some specific aims. We first of all want to see if anything you can imagine can be produced by a bacteria, a yeast cell, or a CHO cell. And of course, that's not the case. So we want to define the boundaries. We want to see where are the limits. What types of molecules will never ever be interesting to produce in a biosustainable way. So that's one thing. The next thing has to do with the fact that oil is still very cheap. Some of you may think it's expensive to fill up your car. Well, recently it has dropped, but nevertheless it is quite expensive. But compared to the expense of using oil-based production, biosustainable production from chemical factories like cell factories is still more expensive. And the reason it's more expensive to produce chemicals by bacteria or yeast or CHO cells simply is that the time and resources that go into optimizing these microorganisms or cell cultures to produce enough in terms of industrial production, that time and those man years that go into it are still so big that we cannot compete efficiently with oil-based production. And as you all know, in industry, it's the bottom line which counts. So if there is a way which is cheaper than other ways, then go for the cheap way. They don't think in a sustainable way, most of the companies at least. So we have to convince industrial companies that by investing time and money, especially the last thing, in trying to cut down the process line by reducing manpower needs and also money, then eventually we may have a chance to compete economically, not just sustainably, but also economically with chemical production from oil-based products. So that is really the major mission of the center, to show that it's possible by using smart shortcuts in the way we design these factories, cell factories, that we can do that. Then, of course, we will develop new technologies. That's part of the game. So what we think in terms of biological, technological development is that if we are smart enough, and if the methods that we develop are smart enough, we can actually make the shortcuts. We can actually make those processes economically competitive. And finally, of course, it's very important to Novo Nordisk, to Novozymes, to Denmark, to Europe, to the globe, to continuously develop new talent. So we take education very seriously. And when you ask the Novo Nordisk Foundation why they want to support this basic research, obviously they can see an interesting possibility of hiring new people with new skills, and therefore also make their own companies, which are owned by the foundation, in a better way or a better position to compete with the rest of the world. So they have a hidden agenda, which is not so hidden, but still, of course, being a Dane, I really would like to see Novozymes compete with even Spanish companies, if you excuse me. So there is a kind of synergistic activity in this, and therefore, if you look at it, you cannot see anything here, anything detailed, but I think you have an impression that all these people, this is from 2013, 2 years ago, we are many more today, but the average age of these people would be in the 35-year-old. So I'm a little bit above that, and there will be a few people below that. But the average age, I think, is about 35 years. What you cannot see here is that it covers a huge number of nationalities. 70% of all employees are non-Danes. So we hire staff from all over the world. And we try to get the best. And some of them are sitting in this office. Okay, so this is, in practical terms, what we try to do. We try to do basic research in part of the center, which we would like to see as cutting-edge science. So we try to do the best biological science that we can, and we also hope that this is competitive internationally. And therefore, we try to publish in the best journals. We have commercialized research where we take patents and we make sure that it can be protected if we invent some, for example, new technologies, new products, new ways to produce products, and so forth. And by protecting our own developments, our own technological developments or product developments, we have a chance to make spin-out companies. The first couple of companies have already been spun out of the center, and I think in the contract it said that we should spin out 2 companies a year. That's not going to be achieved. But I think we will eventually see that more and more people would like to take part in a spin-out. And that is really very interesting for us, having the faculty positions in the center, because that, at least in Denmark, is really, really difficult to get young people to risk their sort of life, so to speak, by having a dream of making a spin-out company instead of going to one of the big established companies. So we try to encourage even the PhD students who are doing interesting projects that they should think about making a spin-out option, and they can go together or they can take their supervisor and try to get some help from him or her or whatever, but spin-outs are really interesting. And that is also what we try to encourage by training in entrepreneurship. So when you start your work in the lab, think about how it can actually be converted into industrial production or whatever. Commercial application, and I believe we have a whole group of people, 3 people at the moment, who take care of all these things. So you don't have to sit and do all the stupid and sometimes very boring work with writing patent applications. There's an office in the center that will take care of that. So they will take off the burden from you of writing all the bullshit text that has to go into a patent application. But of course you have to deliver the science, and you have to make sure that the scientific presentation of the invention is clear and precise and distinct. Yeah, I think this is more or less the same. We also help, this business office help identifying industrial partners. That's very important. Although some of us have sort of networks in industry, we don't have sort of time or the complete network knowledge, and therefore it's really excellent to have people who know a lot of companies in Europe, in the US, maybe even in Asia. So once you begin to think about your project and the possible products coming out of it, you can go and talk to these business people, and then they will suggest that maybe your invention would really benefit from being placed in one of these companies. Instead of you think yourself you can do everything, then making a contract with a company might actually, in some cases, maybe in many cases, be quite beneficial. So what's the characteristic features? Well, we have very strong drivers, which means that we have tried to employ people at different levels, science faculty level. I would say the group leader level is the most important one. So we have a number of young and very ambitious and very smart group leaders who really push the process, which drives rapid growth. And as I said, speed is one of the major missions of the center. We want to make sure that we can deliver solutions as fast as possible. At the moment, we think we are one of a kind in the world, but that situation is not stable. So already now we see similar activities popping up in Asia, in the US, in Europe, and what we could lean on in the beginning, namely being a unique research center, that is history. So now we are in a very competitive world with other research centers globally, which will do the best to compete with us. We are a hybrid organization, which means that we have quite a substantial amount of the 1.1 billion Danish kroner goes into basic research, and that's one. I'm one of those sector heads that run the basic research. And then we have, which is unusual, at least in a university situation, we have a very large part going into translational research, which means that here, very, very specific development of product lines or of cell factory lines or of making specific technologies are run in an almost industrial way. And for that, there is a specific management that makes sure that only projects which fulfill a number of criteria are allowed into this unit, because they have a chance of running into patent applications and even spin out companies. So that is perhaps a little bit unusual for an academic institution. 10% administration, I think it's actually less than that. We have, and that, I think that's, when I look at the DTU administration, which is growing and growing and growing like cancer, we have been able in the center to keep a very, very small amount of money, which means a small staff for administration. And first of all, and I'm sure the primary reason is that the administrators we have are really good. They know what they're doing, they work fast, and they are very, very easygoing people. And therefore, I hope we can stay with the 10% administration. This is historically low in Danish universities. I think I've already talked about this. Yes, then we are, as I said, we are affiliated to the Technical University of Denmark, and so the Technical University has a tradition for working with industry, which is not surprising. We are pretty well up in the quality estimates of European technical universities, and we have a very tight interaction with the management at ETU. And then, of course, the location, not only by being in the technology transfer part, but now moving back to the campus of ETU, means that we are in close connection with the administration of ETU, but what is more important, also with our colleagues and students. So since we are now in the science park, we don't have access to ordinary ETU students, but we will have that 1 year from now when we move to the campus. I think that's one of the most important things we can benefit from. I have missed access to students in the center, and I think it's going to change a lot that we will attract perhaps the brightest students at ETU. I've been at ETU for 30 years. I think it's one of the best educations I've ever met at this university. So basically we can profit tremendously from attracting good students at all levels by being neighbors to that. Just a few words about the section where I'm sitting myself. As I said, all the work that really is important is run by group leaders, Alex Tofko, Morten Sommer, and Morten Nørholm. And I'm not going to talk at all about the details of what they're doing. They're doing different things. That's important. That was important to me when we started the section, that we tried out a number of interesting alleys, a combination of technology development and self-factory design, metabolic engineering, and so forth. Everything, not everything, but many things were tried. We closed down those activities which did not seem to lead us anywhere, and then we have supported and expanded those that seem to be very efficient and promising. So we have been in a kind of search phase, and we are now narrowing down some of the methods and some of the technologies which we think really hold promise for cutting down the time it takes to make successful things. Finally, I want to mention Factory, which is a Marie Curie European PhD network. Dario and Patricia and Ivan and Isota, and I don't know if there's anybody else. So we have, by sheer luck, we got a huge grant from EU where we could feed 14 PhD students. And we have 12 of those students working in the center to work at the ETU. And this was the first real big effort in education, and it's been going very well. There were 3 main areas of research in this program: discovery of novel biosynthesis routes and products, metabolic engineering based on pathway assembly and optimization, and development of fission production scenarios. As you can see, these interact quite intimately with the rest of the program of the center. So we didn't try to diverse it completely from the center, but we tried, at least in a few cases, to introduce new organisms, not just E. coli, not just Saccharomyces, but actually other organisms which we think look promising. And we are all the time trying to introduce new things by external funding, which could open up new ways in the center, in addition to those already set up. So, as we probably know, Denmark, PhD education is a mixture of education and research. There's a research program for everybody and a supervisor for everybody, but we also have put an emphasis on taking courses. Entrepreneurship was mandatory for all the students, so they went to the Copenhagen Business School, and there was a course there that trains the students into think in an entrepreneur fashion. And other courses have been taken by some or all or just a few of the students. It's based on an individual study plan. We also have companies on board, so 10 different companies in Europe have made commitments to host and to help and support the students. This has been the most difficult task of all, not necessarily because of the companies, but because of DTU. Because DTU thinks every time there's a contact with the industry, they can be rich at DTU. And of course, the world doesn't work like that way. But anyway, in most cases, we have been quite successful with that. So now we are basically halfway through. So we will have a midterm evaluation of the center. I want some new microbes. I'm fed up with E. coli, so I want to see new microbes coming in. So we will see if we can, in the next 5-year period, if we can actually open up a little bit the doors in the center and get something in, which is not just the historical things that we've been doing for 5 years. We'll see how it works. I think we should also really try to focus on biosustainable production, because growing E. coli in glucose, minimal medium, and producing a chemical is not what I understand of biosustainable production. So it would be great if we could take some of the biomass that is now a waste product from agriculture or from other areas, and then convert the biomass into something which gives useful production. And that we haven't touched upon at all. But I think the experience and the technologies we have developed now, we can actually begin to think a little bit out of the box and now begin to focus on, at least try to see if we can use some of all this as a support for growth. So finally, I just wanted one word about Spanish microbiologists in Denmark. As I said, I've been at ECU for 30 years. I have always had at least one Spanish student in my group, all the 30 years. So for me, it is an everlasting love affair. I think there's something about Spanish, Danish, social behavior and humor and other areas which match quite well. So I may have a Spanish mind. I don't know. I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately. But I think that when I talk around, we have many Spanish people in the center, and I just have the feeling that most Spanish people feel comfortable in Denmark. And I hope that this initiative that we're running here will really bring in more, and I think it would be wonderful if we could send some things to Spain as well. That's difficult because of language problems, but I think it could be interesting. And the way to do it, I think, is what we're doing here: spread the word. And we have had, with all the sort of 30 years I've had with Spanish microbiology, there's only one which wasn't very good. And I'm talking about a 30. So in general, it was quite nice. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
What was your applause?
Okay, so now as the last part of the talk, because we have been talking about the problem with oil, we have been talking about biosustainability, we have been talking about the tools that we have, also all the good initiatives that we have here in Denmark, presented by Søren. So now I want to talk about, the applications and the limitations that we have in biosustainability. And I want to do this by asking you this question: what is biosustainability doing for you, actually? How is biosustainability going to change the world? Okay, so of course those are the applications, right? So probably the first thing that comes to your mind when we're talking about replacing oil with the biosustainable alternatives is, okay, well, so what is going to happen with my car? Great. So, for example, if we talk about biodiesel, biodiesel is already being produced and it's already being used. You can already buy it, but it hasn't been produced enough to replace all the diesel produced from petrochemicals. And this is because biodiesel is produced mainly from crops. And as Daria said before, crops are also used for food. So then you have there a competition between food and fuel that actually has many problems, socially and economically, of course. So what is one of the alternatives for this? Using microorganisms for this. We can use microorganisms that they already produce a lot of oil, like a lot of fat. Like, for example, algae. Actually, the gas company BP is already producing, or is doing some research on algae for producing biodiesel. And we can also try to produce it from organisms that they usually don't produce any fat at all. But we can modify their metabolism to try to make it produce more fat. This is the case we can use yeast and E. coli because those are like the basis that we have in biotechnology so far. So another thing that we can use microorganisms for is in health. Probably when you talk about the microorganisms or bacteria, the first thing that you think is infections, diseases, and so on. But actually we can use them for curing the disease and illness. For example, traditionally in medicine, what we are using is plants. But usually the concentration of the compound that is actually doing something in the disease is so low, so small, that actually the extraction from these plants is unsustainable. For example, in the case of Taxol, it's a potent drug for cancer, you need 8 60-year-old trees to cure or to treat a person with cancer. So, I mean, of course, we cannot afford that. And that's what makes that these kind of treatments, they're really expensive. So, what can we do with that? Then the only thing we have to do is, as I said, use those tools, take the things, the function that we want from the plant, put it in the microorganism, and make it to produce. And actually, there are some companies that they are already producing Taxol, and artemisinin, that is the most effective malaria treatment available so far. They're producing it from yeast. But actually, we can also use this microorganism not just as a platform for producing something that is coming from plants, but also we can find some new drugs that they are already produced from bacteria or from other microorganisms. And why is that? Because usually when they are in their own environment, they have to fight each other to see which one is the one that is surviving. So actually they are producing something that they are killing some other bacteria. So this is good because now we have some problems with the super resistant bacteria that they are spreading and all these old diseases that we already eradicated, and now they are coming back because of these super resistant backs. So one of the so we can use these microorganisms to try to discover new drugs. And one of the environments that is the most rich in biodiversity is oceans and seas. So here you can find many different microorganisms that they have never been studied before, and you can find many different new things that we can use in medicine. But usually the problem is that you cannot just take these organisms from here and grow them in the lab, because we don't know how to grow them. So for this, we have a technique that is metagenomics. So this, what we do is we take a small amount of sample from this environment here. We take the DNA that you already explained, that is these small pieces of information to produce some function. And we put these small pieces of DNA in an organism that we know how to make them grow. And this way, we just have to look for those that we want to cure whatever disease we're looking for, or to kill other organisms or whatever. So this way, they have been found many different antibiotics, anti-cancer drugs, and so on. So this is a good tool where we can use nature for. And the last application I'm going to talk about is the production of biochemicals. This is also known as green chemistry. And basically, it's use microorganisms to produce chemicals that they're usually or traditionally now produce from fuels and from oil. My favorite example is the one that I'm going to put here, and it's vanilla, because we all like vanilla ice cream, right? And we are really used to that. So vanilla, the specific flavor of vanilla is a molecule that is vanillin, and this one comes from the vanilla orchid. But the vanilla orchid is not, of course, the production of vanilla from like harvesting these vanilla orchids cannot sustain the amount of vanilla we're all the time eating. And actually, 99% of vanillin is produced chemically from oil. But now there are many companies, actually Volva is a company that's here in Denmark, they're producing this vanillin and they are already commercializing it as using yeast. It is the same yeast that we have in beer, but it smells nicer. Okay. So actually, I mean, I presented some examples, but actually we're not really doing too much for you now, because actually we still are in the long run. We still have a lot of things, problems to overcome. There's many limitations. For example, one of them is that many of the compounds that we want to produce, of the chemicals that we need for our daily life, they are toxic to cells. So actually, you need to have a high concentration of production when you want to go to have a process that is economically beneficial for a company or something like that. But then when you reach to those high concentration, then your cells, they don't like to have those chemicals. And they stop producing them, or they just die. And that's, for example, what happened with some acids, like fumaric acid, that is a precursor for plastics. So you cannot really get high concentrations because your cells, they just stop growing. So there's many things that the scientists are planning to do with this, or they're trying to do. One of the things is just find new organisms that they are more resistant naturally. They have already the tools. Nature has already the tools for tolerate these chemicals, and we just need to learn which tools are they using and then use them. Another thing, of course, is the price of sugar. As Søren said, is usually what the companies are doing right now, or like how biosustainability is said, is that you give some sugar to your cells and then they produce something. But of course, sugars also have a price. So actually, this is increasing the cost that you're putting into your process. So we need to find something that is cheaper. And of course, that's waste, as Søren said. We just need to take the waste from agricultural waste, human waste, all the kind of waste that we can, just extract the sugar that they are there and give it to the cells. Of course, maybe cells, they don't like to eat it, but we will convince them. We need to eat them somehow. So that's another goal that the biosustainability has to reach. And everything is kind of related to the same. We need to increase the productivity. This is the main limitation we have now. We have to produce a lot of compound. We need to reduce the cost. We need to make the process efficient. Because at the end, this is a business. We have to compete to the oil business, to the oil industry. And we have to show that we're more efficient and cheaper, of course, cleaner. But that's the main goal of biosustainability. Okay, so actually the real question is not what biosustainability is doing for you right now, because we still have to do a lot of stuff. So what is biosustainability going to do for you in the future? Because there's a beautiful future that is coming from biosustainability. Because we want to, like, the whole goal, at least the way I see, is that we want to use the waste that we create, that is a lot, then use that waste to produce everything that we need in our daily life by using some tools that have been provided of the living organisms, and we can find solutions in nature. Okay, yeah, that's good. But it's still really not changing your life, right? How do you see that this is related to you? I don't know. But that's the whole point, that's the thing. Your life is not going to change. because we're going to change the world, but you won't know. So thank you very much for coming. Just let's go for some questions. Of course, you can ask the three of us if you want, and we can also have some questions afterward with some beers or something. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay, so just a little bit about advertisement. This was the first event we organized about a certain scientific topic, but we are planning another event about computer science. So just let you know that if you follow us on social networks, you can see when we are organizing this next event about computer science. We will be glad to see you here as well. So thank you for coming, and I really hope that you enjoyed this format and this talk. So please feel free also to give some feedback, because it's always useful. So thank you very much, and let's go for some beers. But thank you. Pictures.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And bye online audience.
You wave to your mother?
Yeah.
Bye, Mom.
Bye. Hasta luego.